Nova Scotia communities like the idea of wind farms, but love for turbines is in very short supply here in Ontario. So, why the difference? That is a question two researchers from Western University set out to answer. Geographers Chad Walker and Jamie Baxter studied 10 different communities in both provinces that have the turbines. Now, what they found is that acceptance has less to do with the actual big structures and more to do with shared community financial benefit. And Chad Walker joins me now. Good morning.
Good morning, Wei. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. It's appropriate we're talking about this on such a windy day.
It is.
Now, you studied wind farms in three communities here in Ontario: Adelaide and Metcalfe, west of London, Norwich Township, Wainfleet in the Niagara area, and you studied 7 in Nova Scotia. Can you start off by explaining why you chose these two provinces to look at?
Yes, definitely. So the inspiration for a lot of this work partly came from our understanding of past research by ourselves and others across Canada, which has looked at Ontario and the rising level of opposition to wind in the province. It's been well documented in the media as well, and perceptions of health effects are particularly high in Ontario as well. And so we're coming to a greater understanding kind of what's going on in Ontario. We weren't exactly sure exactly why this was happening, and to do so, or in an attempt to do so, we compared a lot of the policy mechanisms and the way, basically, in which wind's being developed in Ontario, compared with another province here in Ontario, in Nova Scotia, to kind of investigate, is there a difference? Does this difference come down to the way in which wind is being built in both provinces?
Okay. And so what was the attitude that you discovered in Nova Scotia towards the turbines?
I guess much more supportive, much more accepting of the wind projects in their communities, in these local rural communities. It's probably summed up pretty quickly in the one of our statistics we provide. 80% support in Nova Scotia versus 27 in Ontario, and so we see approximately a 3 times increase between the provinces, and that was rather alarming and surprising to us.
That is a dramatic difference.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So what accounts for it?
So it's a complex story, I guess, that I should lead with. What this research did, what this published research looked at, though, was the impact or the effect of community benefits programs or investment opportunities for people in Nova Scotia, where projects under COMFIT, a past policy program of the province, projects only went forward in Nova Scotia if they were going to be majority owned by community members or community groups or universities, and so on. And so the thinking being that more financial benefits would stay in these local communities and certainly within the province. We contrasted that program with Ontario's traditional kind of developer-led model, in which large corporations, sometimes international corporations, come into communities, and they are the ones responsible for development, and they're the ones, reaping the large majority of the financial benefits from development.
And so the projects in Nova Scotia, was it just the financial benefits that were key, or were there other sort of intangibles?
There's definitely a lot of differences between the two provinces. Some of the most obvious setback distances, or the distance turbines are from homes, is generally larger in Nova Scotia. It should be noted, too, projects there are usually quite smaller, especially the community-based ones, because to get community ownership, it's much easier to raise the funds and raise investment for smaller projects than it would be, for a 50 turbine project here in Ontario. We also have some research under review right now that's looking at the way in which things like open houses and in generally planning processes are different between the two provinces. But for this piece here, this research, we really focused it on the financial benefits, and we found that to be playing some role in shaping levels of local support.
Yeah, but the key, I gather, was that the community had a support for it right from the beginning, and they were part of the project right from the beginning.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It wasn't imposed on them.
No, not at all. So these, as I mentioned, these projects only go forward. They only get approval if they're majority owned by community groups, and so it's pretty easy to kind of lead from there and think communities are definitely going to be more involved, particularly when they're the owners or they're the proponents
And
of these projects.
here's another interesting thing from your research. Quite often we hear people raise, health concerns about wind farms. And where does that issue come into your analysis?
So that's another one. Almost conveniently, it's a 3 times lower levels of health perceptions or health problems from turbines in the province of Nova Scotia. And so again, we can kind of take that a lot of different directions in terms of what's the exact cause of this difference. So setback distances, number of turbines in the area might be playing a role, but as well financial benefits and generally the way in which turbines are being developed in the province may be playing a role as well.
So if you were to be an advisor for the Ontario government on green energy, and what would you tell them if they wanted to, in terms of dealing with a wind farm proposal?
So our research really suggests changes to the current system here in Ontario. The status quo, if you will, has been to build large projects relatively quickly and have them owned by large corporations. We see across the world, particularly in continental Europe, where support for these projects is high. It comes down to community-based development, and that's kind of what we're looking at here in Nova Scotia as well. And so I think the move towards community-based development and move toward development that ultimately brings not only more benefits. This was another interesting finding from our research. Residents were actually more interested in kind of the fair distribution or equity in terms of financial benefits than they were in the total amount. And so that they were fighting, or they were, I guess, suggesting to us that, having these benefits, money or otherwise, distributed fairly within their community was much more important, which is something we don't see at all right now in Ontario. So in Ontario, people that have turbines on their land are getting, relatively large sums of money per year to have turbines on their land, whereas next door neighbors, don't even have the opportunity in most cases to benefit financially.
Well, Chad, thank you very much for sharing your study with us.
Well, thank you very much, Wei.
Chad Walker is a Western University geographer whose latest research compared attitudes to wind farms in Nova Scotia and Ontario. And he found that when community control and shared financial benefits were part of the arrangement, people are a lot more open to the idea of hosting a wind farm. Nova Scotia succeeded in getting that support. Ontario did not. What do you think? If communities had more say, approving them, if they saw more of the financial benefit, would they be more open to having them close by?